Mississippi. Mississippi. When I was a child, that name held such mystery to me. It sounded magical. But in the 1960s, in the years prior to that, Mississippi was not a magical place. No, it was a cauldron of brutality, of beatings and burnings and bombings and bruisings. Phil Oak, he wrote a ballad that said, Mississippi, if you were to drag her muddy rivers, nameless bodies you will find. In the fat trees of the forest have hid 1,000 crimes. No, Mississippi was not a magical place. But into this cauldron of terror was born a woman. Her name was Fannie Lou Hamer. 1962, I decided to do something with my life. I didn't know this one thing would change it. You see, I was the 20th child of sharecroppers, and I was barefoot and hungry all my life growing up. All I wanted, so bad. Oh, I wanted to be white. Oh, please make me white. But I couldn't change the color of my skin. No, no, no. But in 1962, I went to a mass meeting with the SNCC, Students for Non-Violent Coordinating Committee. I sure did go to that. And for the first time, I heard that I could register to vote. I never knew I could vote. And I raised my hand. Ooh, I want to vote. Well, a few days later, I was down there at the Sunflower County registering myself to vote. Well, there was some question about de facto law. So I didn't take that time, but I was just proud that I went. But when I went back to the plantation that I was a sharecropper on, Mr. Marlowe had been there. And my kids and my husband come on out, and they said that the boss man, the kids said, the boss man been here, Mama. And my husband said, yeah, he's been raising Cain. He's been raising Cain. He heard that you went to register to vote. And before he finished speaking, Mr. Marlowe drove up and he got out of his truck and he come to me and he said, Fannie Lou, you can't register to vote. You get back there and you take off your name off that registration. Hey, and I don't know if you can stay here anymore. I don't know. Mississippi, it ain't ready for nothing like this. No, it ain't ready. You get back there and unregister yourself. Sir, I didn't register you to vote. I registered me. That night, we had to get out of that shack and move in with somebody else. And 2 weeks later, 16 bullets come through the wall of my bedroom. Nobody was hurt that night. But yes, Mississippi was filled with beatings and bombings and burnings and bruisings. 1963, I was at a voter registration, and I went and I come back from it. Because by this time, I was an actual field worker with the SNCC. Yes, yes, yes. And I didn't know, as a sharecropper's child and a sharecropper, illiterate, I didn't know I had it in me. But wherever I went at these mass meetings, I always started off with one song, my favorite song, This Little Light of Mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let 1964, that was that freedom summer. But before 1964 happened, something else happened in 1963. The police, they didn't like what I was doing. And so they arrested me. They got me off a Continental Trailway bus and took me to their jail in Montgomery County. And I could hear the screams and the shouts going on in the different cells. Then it was my turn. The highway patrolman and the sheriff, he come in, this cussing and yelling and calling me all kinds of names, and they carried me to another cell. And there were 2 Negro prisoners in there, so broken. And they had me lie down on that cot, and they gave their billy clubs to one of those Negro prisoners, and they cursed him and made him hit me. And when he was finished with me, so exhausted, they gave the billy club to the other Negro prisoners. And I still have kidney problems to this day. Ooh, but I survived, and I continued on. So that in 1964, it was Freedom Summer. Thousands of people come to Mississippi to make a change. We had people like Mario Savio from New York, a high school graduate. He'd come and spend the summer mostly in Macomb, Mississippi, before he went on to be a UC Berkeley student, made a change out there in that country, California. Then we had Harry Belafonte. He come and he brought his music and his money, ooh, and his charm. Then there was Shirley MacLaine. She was in my kitchen often there, and she'd be kicking beans, stirring my beans. I always had beans on because we had so many workers coming in, they're hungry, and I had to give them that food. Yeah. And they'd be coming, all these thousands of people, to run freedom schools for the colored children, to teach them to read and to write and to sing and to play instruments, and they bring vitamins for their nutrition because so many of our people were starving. So many of our children were starving. Oh, they come that summer and flooded the whole of Mississippi, but the white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, they wanted to put a stop to that freedom summer. And they captured 3 young men, 1 Negro and Christian, 2 white and Jewish, and those 3 men disappeared. No one knew where they were. And it was such a stir, it was on the national news that J. Edgar Hoover himself come down with hundreds of FBI agents trying to find out what happened to those 3 men. It took over $800,000 of giving out money, trying to find out where those men were, till finally a Methodist preacher and a police officer began to talk to the FBI agent. And what they had to do was go out to an earthen dam, and with their shovels, and the smell of decay come. And they knew they had found the men. And they kept shoveling, and there they were. The Negro man had been shot and beaten first. The other 2 shot at point-blank range. Their blood must have been on the perpetrator. Oh, it was hard to imagine. All the United States was so upset with what had happened. And then the trial after trial after trial, and finally, several other white men were convicted of murder, the first time that has ever happened in Mississippi since the time of Reconstruction. But in 1964, I went to the National Democratic Convention in Atlantic City, New Jersey. There were 63 of us who went. We had gotten 63,000 African-American Negro men and women to sign to be registered, so we said, we're going to send 63 of us. It wasn't legal. We could be arrested. We could be beaten. We could be bombed. But we went. Ooh, Lyndon B. Johnson, he didn't know what to do with us. Ooh, he didn't know what to do with us. We wanted to be seated on the floor with all the lily white representatives from Mississippi. Ooh, but all the way from Texas to Florida up to Maryland, Virginia, Maryland, said if we were to be seated on the floor, they'd be walking out. A lot of them did walk out. I didn't get a chance to sit on the floor, but I did sit at a table. And I addressed the chairman and everyone in the United States because I was on national TV talking about those beatings and the bombings and the things that have happened to me in Mississippi. Ooh, that night there were over 400 telegrams that came to the White House that night in support of what we were doing. I didn't get to be seated as a delegate then, but in 1968, I was a legal delegate from Mississippi. And at the end of that summer, 1964, those Jim Crow laws that were strangling us so tight began to loosen. Even in Macomb, Mississippi, they raised up $5,000, the white citizens there did, to find out who was doing these bombings of these black churches. And in some of the Holiday Inns, they started opening up their doors to Negro people. And they started feeding them in their restaurants. Oh, the change was coming, the change was coming, and I was being a part of that change. Yes, yes, yes. Mississippi, Mississippi, M-I-S-S-I-S-S-I.